Good morning, everyone present here. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar on Science Meets Business, the Fundamentals of Food Processing, hosted by AABN. This is the 70th webinar organized by AABN. I take this opportunity to express my deep appreciation to you all for honoring us by being here. It is gratifying to note that the agenda of today's webinar covers a wide range of future relevant topics, and we have in our midst our distinguished speaker to share his experience in specific area of specialty. I extend a very warm welcome to Mr. Amit Vaishnav for coming here and willing to impart their expertise to our AABN community. It's heartwarming to see a happy bunch of participants on a Sunday morning. Welcome to you all for responding to our call and being here. Hopefully today proves to be a very fruitful day to all present today. We all experience an unprecedented situation with the global COVID-19 pandemic. A virus not visible to the naked eye has put the world on pause. It has put into question how and where to go from here. We know much more about the virus now. The options for treatment are better understood. We have gathered evidence and best practices for breaking chains of transmission. We have learned to respond in a more targeted and tailored manner, but we also face new challenges. We are particularly concerned about issues of community engagement. This pandemic is far from over. We need to adjust all our efforts to be suitable for the long run. Strong leadership integrated in a whole of government and whole of society approach will help to sustain a consistent and robust response. Mental health must be an integral part of all response efforts. The food industry is a consumer-oriented market. Consumer taste and preferences are constantly evolving and becoming more individualized. On one side, the consumer wishes for increasingly personalized products and services, and on the other side, sustainability of products and production system also plays a major role. The lingering effects of the pandemic on food processors were felt throughout 2021 with labor issues, increased automation, ingredient shortages, the need for additional energy efficiencies and technologies to help streamline operations and more, all having an impact. Which changes are here to stay and what can processors expect in 2022? Mr. Amit Vaishnav, our guest speaker today, will provide a snapshot of where we are today and how to prepare for what's coming in the years ahead. Mr. Amit Vaishnav, with his combination of academic knowledge and practical know-how, will take us through the specific challenges and inventive ways to overcome them. He will also lead you to identifying key profit drivers in terms of products and markets and inspire you towards evolving success strategies to benchmark your business. I would like to welcome and introduce you to Mr. Amit Vaishnav, Managing Director, Mega Food Products, Madras Private Limited. Amit has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Maharaja Sayajirao University, Baroda, with over 40 years experience in business and food. He has vast hands-on experience in the formulation, manufacture, marketing of foods, RTS beverages, sauces, jams, pickle, mayo syrups, chutney, spice powders, soup mixes, beverage powders, health mixers, ready to eat products, culinary paste, and so many more products. He started his career by establishing an industry making import substitute fiberglass cabinets for computers and monitors. Later, he was responsible for setting up the nationwide network of distributors, service centers, and offices for a popular brand of television, Onida. Then he spearheaded the first rural hire purchase offering into widespread rural areas across West and South India. Concurrently, he steered his company into the fresh food catering business to pursue his passion in food. He drove the company in a research program for over 6 years to innovate and standardize various products and the manufacturing process. In 1998, at this time when modern retail had just entered India, his company became India's first manufacturer of private label products for food world. And over the years, the company for Metro Cash and Carry, Food Bazaar, Big Bazaar, Star Bazaar, Reliance, Archie, Lion, Bambino, Tiffy's, Salsillo, Elite, Priya, Ruchi, Blue Pine, etc. He has been exporting products for the consumption of the UN armies at various missions in Africa. He is associated with many universities, Avinashilingam, Karunya, Kongu, SRM, Periyar, Anna University Madras, and many colleges, Stella Maris, Etraj College, MOP Vaishnav, BCM, and many more. He takes a lot of effort to train the internees from various colleges who do their mandatory internship at Mega Foods, covering not only the technical subject but also imparting quality skills, knowledge of ISO, HACCP, etc. Apart from a host of life-changing skills and tools. An inventor, he has invented liquid sucrose, which will find wide application in food industry. A mentor, he advises many entrepreneurs and industries in food processing and various matters. An industry expert, his services are available on consultative basis from conceptualization to implementation on mutually acceptable terms. With a guest speaker with distinguished experience, I'm not going to extend my speech because I'd like him to take over. As we discuss different emerging views and innovations in the industry, the opportunities and challenges, I believe today is going to be a day of learning for each one of us. Hope you have an engaging day that is beneficial for the future of your careers and the industry at large. Thank you, and over to Mr. Amit.
So thank you very much, sir, for the kind words that you gave in introduction. And it will be my privilege to walk and talk everyone through a small journey, albeit for almost an hour it might be. But I do hope to walk you through the journey of the food processing industry in the last 75 years, okay, the post-independence. And what are the challenges that are there and what are the opportunities that come out. Okay, so to begin with, India has been an aggregate economy. We are dependent on the farmers who grow our produce, and as such, India was a farming community. Pre-independence, we used to export substantially food grains to the rest of the world. And post-independence, certain ideology of social coexistence with some of our international majors and countries, we accepted in the name of social practices, giving free ration to a large number of our economically weaker sections of people who were earlier subsisting sufficiently with the Indian grown agro produce. However, in 1951, the US made a law called the Public Legislation 480, which brought with it a gift to India, and a gift to India of about 2 to 3 shiploads of food grains every month. And mostly it was wheat and sometimes a little bit of rice. So this went on from 1951, and not many know about it, but it probably closed only in 2004. But most of the ration wheat and rice that was circulated around was initially of very poor quality, where we also had co-procurement by the Food Corporation of India. And this led to a lot of, cross-genetic, overflow from the imported grains into our Indian grains. And came with it what was known as the Congress grass, a weed that came with the wheat that was brought in with this PL 480. And right across India, there barely is a state or a taluk or a province which does not have this wheat called the Congress grass. It's called Congress colloquially because it came during the regime. It's just a weed. And the weed, what it does is that it spoils the land, it makes it infertile, and it gives you a useless weed which cannot be done anything with. Now, progressively, with biogenetically engineered seeds that came into India from the world's largest company, currently bankrupt. It is called Monsanto. And they gave us all our seeds, and progressively they became single cropping, single sowing seeds progressively. It didn't happen immediately. Farmers were not left with any seed bank, which was the earlier practice. So every year they had to reach out to for governmental support to get the seeds free or at nominal payment. And these seeds were all pre-engineered, so they needed certain kind of chemicals known as fertilizers to help them grow. So India became dependent substantially on the import of fertilizers, urea, potash, etc., which was earlier never the case in the Indian agri scenario for centuries. But we became unknown victims of the so-called modern day practices over the years. And the large Indian economy, which is now about 140 crore people, may not be shocking to know that almost the farming community and their families and the hawkers, vendors, retailers, the supply chain, etc., account for almost 70% of the population. So if you, I mean, this of course, because most of our people stay in rural India, 84% of India is in the rural space, which does not include the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities. So what has happened is that this active farmer community over the last 70, I can't say 75 years, I would say other than the last 10 years, okay, 65 years or 60 years prior to that, we became dependent on certain practices which made our farming community poorer by the year. And so Indian poverty never rose above the benchmark, despite all the efforts that India as a country and its people tried to put in. Because if 65% of the economy, which is based on agriculture, is not prospering, naturally the economy cannot prosper. However, things have been changing. This current last two generations of our Indian population have realized most of the drawbacks and are doing substantial work in the understanding and implementation of better practices in the name of organic farming. We've actually, what we're trying to do is reverse the wheel 75 years and go back to what India was. It will take time. It has already taken 10 years or so, or 15 years of these practices, but progressively the organic farming and the Indian farming is picking up. You have certain fruit and vegetable sectors, like, for example, the Indian grape. Okay, what we eat as grapes, which come from Maharashtra, etc. area, most of these are organic, completely organic over the last 15, 20 years, because it takes 3 to 5 years for a farm to become organic. And it's not just adequate for him to be organic. His neighboring farms also, and those neighboring to them, need to be organic, so that the spray of any of these insecticides or pesticides which hamper our natural seed bank don't come into the farmlands. So progressively you have horticulture crops like wheat and rice and vegetables, etc., which are converting, albeit on a slow and steady level, into the traditional Indian farming. And then traditional Indian farming is going to bring back the glory to the farmer. The Like I said, in the Indian context, farming, as we all know, there is alternate year of a bumper crop and a crop that doesn't do well. It doesn't do too well. So traditionally, the Indian farmer had no loans. It was a savings economy. So he was able to withstand the failure of one crop into the bumper of the next. And these small little things evaporated over a period of 65, 70 years. And the farmer was forced to borrow every year. And as we know, like in Maharashtra and other places, large number of farmers commit suicide. You have got farmers that went on a protest for a very long period in the last couple of years, not knowing that what was being set out for them was good for them. However, for reasons best known to them, they chose to stick to their guns. And while it may take some more time for them to get educated and understand what's good for them, the uh, alternate year cropping patterns that will eventually rule the farming community will help them go back to their being able to save money and get out of the loan shark segments. And one of the things that hampered the farming communities was the fact that government promulgated a concept called the APMC many years ago, decades ago, because of which the sole selling concession or rights to sell agro produce came to the hands of a certain set of people. And not necessarily what was in demand was available, and not necessarily what was produced was made available for sale, which led to an imbalance. And the trader in between was making far more money than what the farmer should. As we all know, if you paid 100 rupees for a set of vegetables in the city, the farmer probably got under 5 rupees for the same, or 5 or 10 rupees. And in between went to a number of people who do not really add value to the agriculture. They were just in the supply chain. Probably the highest paid supply chain mechanism in the whole world was our Indian agro supply chain. But things are changing. Okay, and in the last decade or so, the younger generation of the farming community is going back to the farms. As we all know, in the last 6 7 decades, more and more of the younger generation moved to the cities, and therefore only the elders or the very old people or very young people under the age of 20 were available for farming. But that has to change, and that has been changing. The other problem that India has is that the most of the average holding of a farmer is under 1 acre. So by himself, there's little that he can do. So about a decade ago, youngsters of this generation or the previous one got together and started promulgating a concept known as farm produce organizations. Now, this did two things. It took away the sting of borrowing, because the FPOs, the farm produce organizations, became lendable, let's say, groups to which the banks or the financial institutions could lend money, as against the private money lender who's to give to the farmer, because the only asset that he had was a land, which more often than not was already mortgaged to somebody or the other. So he always lived in debt. So in the modern concept of the FPO, the security moves to the crop rather than to the land. So once the farmer groups understand that their crop is their selling commodity, which is going to be an asset. So what they do is they try and ensure that if it's going to fetch 100 rupees, then that the cost of that doesn't exceed 50, so that they can make adequate money. So the cost of funding comes down for the FPO, because now banks and financial institutions can lend at a ridiculously low rates of interest, at 6% to 3% per annum, based on the FPO. And some even are entitled to some kind of grants if they um, put up uh, co-processing facilities in their own immediate um, you know area. So talking about the supply chain in the modern day, what's going to happen is that gone are the days when a farmer is dependent on some guy to pick up his produce and bring it to the mandi. Okay, so uh, you heard of the Internet of Things, where uh, people will supply based on demand. So eventually what will happen is that the organized sector of the farming community from the FPOs,
ரூம்ல இவன் ஐடி இருக்கா, இவன் போட்டோ இருக்கு.
yeah, so they will have adequate. Adequate means not too much, but just adequate to process or pre-process their own agro produce with things like washing, cleaning, cutting, de-stemming, etc., to be done at the farm gate. Now, this accounts for almost 40% of the crop that comes to the mandi. So at the mandi, what happens is they start plucking and de-stemming and doing those kind of things, and it leads to a garbage. And garbage in the city gets to be a bigger problem. Whereas at the village level, this particular output from the pre-processing goes back into the land as manure. Its nutrient value, it's mostly nitrogen that comes from such wastage, and it is mulched back into the soil. If not, it is composted and made into manure. Manure, as we know, has 2-3 things that come with it, including the earthworms, which go and aerate the soil. So it's a scenario where the farmer is then made to think that he has the right to pluck the vegetable or pluck the fruit, but he must put back into the soil the rest of the plant rather than cut it, or rather than burn it, like in some states they burn the stubble, which is a bad practice. Earlier we never burnt it down, we used to mulch it back into the soil. So the modern day science has to pick up the ancient practices which were prevalent in India for centuries, because that is what kept us going as a self-sustaining economy. Our population may have grown up by fourfold since independence, but our opportunities to do better farming are far more. And probably if we put our technology and science right, and in our supply chain, bring in more and more practices which are scientific in nature, and pre-processing, processing in supply chain stage, handling like cold storages, chilling, processing of ripened fruits, etc., and supply to the market only on demand based. Okay, so what's going to happen is that eventually you will find in India at every district level, or let's say every 100 kilometers distance, there would be a district based integrated facility is what has to come up in private public partnership along with the farmers. That's an opportunity for all of us. Now, these are large facilities which are based on the neighboring agriculture farm produce organizations and farmers who actually bring their pre-processed produce to this integrated facility. And such items that need chilling are sent to the chiller. Such items that need freezing are sent to the freezer. The ripened crops are processed into sauces and jams and whatever, cut vegetables or whatever it is. And the spoilage and the wastage is returned back to the farmer so that he can put it back into his farms, because he brings a vehicle load and has to go back empty. So instead he takes back his wastage back into his farm, and that is value addition for him in return. So at the farm gate level, the farmer produce organizations, the FPOs, have to have their small pre-processing in place. And this will go to the nearby district level or integrated pack house, which has all the verticals of food processing present in it, like chilling, like I said, freezing. So freezing has multiple opportunities there. You can have just ordinary freezing, or you can have blast freezing, you can have IQF freezing. So different things will help in different manner. Like for example, if you have peas can be sent straight to IQF. If you have got corn, then you need to decon the cob, and then you need to process it. So based on the crop, based on the, you don't need to bring it to a distant location. Today, an IQF facility may be, let's say, in Chittoor, which is buying its crop from Maharashtra. So instead of that, right in Maharashtra itself, let's say, or right in Karnataka itself, if somebody has this IQF facility in within 100 kilometers of his farmlands, then this processing, which is done on a co-partnership with the local farmers, helps both, helps to get more value for the crop at the local level, and is reducing wastage and is getting the crop available at the right time in the market. So if there is a crop stock of, let's say, 1,000 at the integrated pack house, and if the demand is only 10, then the pack house will send only 10. It won't send 20, because the markets or the mandis in the cities of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, as well as in the mandis in the villages, the price determination is often by supply and demand and not by the value of the crop. So if the demand is more and the supply is less, the prices go up. Like you see every year, the prices of onions and tomatoes and potatoes, they will go up because there is less supply and more demand. Or if there is more supply and less demand, you'll find in Karnataka, every year they throw truckloads of tomatoes on the highway, and nobody wants to even crop them at times because it's a waste. Sending the crop produced by a truck to the mandi is not even going to fetch him as much money as the freight. So given this scenario, scientific practices had to be brought into the farming to bring them back to the traditional farming, to bring supply chain and interim pack houses and integrated pack houses into full scale existence. So for a country as large as India, the kind of potential that we have for pre-processing at farm gate and at village local, at taluk level places, or even the integrated pack house at Zilla or the district level, is so huge. And it's not that we have to be in the city earning a salary or working for a software or electronic company or doing something of that sort. The next generation has to go back into the traditional, scientific, I say traditional and new scientific methods of sustenance. And anything that sustains itself is going to bring with it tremendous growth, because in sustenance lies growth. So we need to bring in all this. So, the tier 1, 2, 3 cities are overfilled with people, and the generations that are there over 25 years of people to 45 or 50 are in the city from the farmlands, which they need to go back. Traditionally, a farmer knows farming by mostly because they've grown with it. They can talk to their farms, but you and I, who live in cities, don't know how to talk to a plant. But these guys can talk to the land, they can talk to the plant. It sounds stupid, but that's how farmers actually, do good farming, because they know what's good for their land. They know what's happening. If the water is less or the water is more, if the sun is too much, if there is rains coming, they know exactly what to do. But that's how they were doing it for centuries. It was genetically imbibed into them, written into their genetic minds. So they've grown up with that. You and I, who live in cities, are not yet fully conversed with this, but we can teach a little bit. And if the younger generations of our farmers go back to farming, it will make our transition more easier and more effective. So currently, about 40% of our produce is lost before it reaches consumption centers. So one of our biggest challenges, like I said, is to bring in scientific methods from pre-processing to integrated intermediate processing to processing on one side and consumption on the other. So there are these supply chain and development that need to happen along with agro-based processing is very important. We conveniently, look at wanting to make or grow whatever the farmer is growing, because the farmer believes if my neighbor is getting a good price for tomatoes, I'll grow tomatoes. If my neighbor gets a good price for something, I'll do the same thing. Now what happens is, there's, because of that, every year there will be an excess of a particular commodity in a particular region, which drives the prices down. But traditionally, they were not doing that. Traditionally, in a cluster of farm, let's say if you take a talk of Tamil Nadu, in Tamil Nadu there are 52 crops, vegetables which are grown commercially. So if you look at sectors like Teni, Kambam, or if you look at each of these going to Dindigul, coming up to Namakkal, Karur, etc. These each one had a certain number of limited crops which were good for that soil. But 52 crops that grow in this area feed the whole of South India. So Karnataka and Andhra and Tamil Nadu and Kerala get these 52 vegetables from this area. But it is subject to all the vagaries of the problems of our new bound system that we have, where it goes to an APMC market, then it goes to a broker, distributor, mandi. The farmer doesn't get much. We need to bring a change by educating and bringing more scientific practice, getting more pre-processing and post-processing done at the farm gate and intermediate level. So like this, you've got one agro sector here. You will have another agro sector of something else, like papaya, which is there in Andhra. Andhra's that Kodugu, that Koderu, which is beyond Tirupati going up to Nellore. Now that place supplies papaya to the whole country. Okay, so you have the red papaya that comes out. It's a foreign breed. It's called Red Lady. It comes from Thailand. The Indian papaya was the yellow solo papaya, which is the yellow color, which comes from Coimbatore area. So that papaya is good for getting the enzymatic from the peel, which is used for papain. Okay, whereas the Red Lady is used in eating. So you have different cropping, and if you ever chance to go there, it's fairly organized. They've got drip irrigation, they've got a 4-year cropping pattern, the 4-year mulching back pattern. Really modern practices have already come into that cultivation of red papaya, because there will be hundreds of square kilometers that are being farmed cooperatively together by the farm owners. And therefore, they are able to succeed and supply the red papaya to the whole country. So if you think that you are having papaya in Kashmir, which is local, it's not so, or in Delhi, or in Calcutta, or in Tamil Nadu, it comes from one locality. So that's one experience that we have to talk of. The other, like I said, is the grape that comes from Nasik, Maharashtra. That grape goes out to the whole country. In fact, it is exported also in large variety, large quantum. So it is modern practices which are clubbed with traditional farming, which actually bring about the change that is required. So, the opportunities are so many, and we, as people, including the farmers, we need to be local and think global, right? So all the engineers and the graduates, etc., all of us who find enterprises in the city, or their younger generation, I would always recommend them to move back to the supply chain, go right down to the farm level, organize these farmers who are their farm produce organizations, get involved with them to set up pre-processing facilities. There's a major opportunity in that at every stage in the supply chain with integrated pack houses and IQF facilities, or freezing, or making of food products like jams and sauces and canned products, etc., which are basically using the ripened crop before they reach the market. So it's not that you need to have exclusive arrangements for buying fruit for that facility. If it has not gone to the market, it would go to wastage. Instead of going to wastage, we are converting it into value. So imagine that fruit which became a jam would have otherwise gone to the soil. It would have been gone to garbage. But instead of that, when it is yet ripe, it is made into a product. It could be made into juice, it could be made into a jam, it could be made into various kinds of things. Okay. So it's a matter of application of the society and community as a whole. When we all get together and say, you know what, let's take responsibility. When we take responsibility and share it, we will make the farmers grow. We make them richer to the extent that we cut out as many intervening layers of trading that are there, and say that, you know what, the market needs a determined amount. The integrated supply chain will supply only that much. So let's say that you have, let's say, an integrated facility near Dindigal. Now, he says that, Trichy has a demand of 10, Madras of 20, Bangalore of 30, so-and-so of 20. So he will dispatch only that much. He's not going to send truckloads. And there, if any one of you have seen the Coimbatore market, trucks start arriving at around 11, 12 at night. And before 2 in the morning, the wholesale trade is over. The fate for the day is decided. If the supply exceeds demand, the price is gone. So after 2 in the morning till 5 in the morning is semi-wholesale. And after 5 in the morning, it's only retail. And this is the story in most agro mandis. So you have mandis, let's say at Batlagundu. Now that is an evening mandi because that feeds markets like Chennai and Bangalore and other places. So the farmers are at the mercy of most of these mandis who not only own the crop, they own the farmer also. They've got the farmer in such great debt that the guy doesn't know what to do. Turning this wheel back 75 years, it can happen only in a sustained manner. And yes, we have a 10-year period that we have already, as a society, been practicing this, but it will take us another 30, 40 years to get into a modern day for Indian farming, where there will be processing and scientific processing available from farm gate to the plate. So finally, when it comes in the city and you want to produce, let's say, a dosa, so that becomes a plate product. So the right amount of right ingredients, the process, etc., goes into making that. So you cannot send a dosa from the village. So you need to send only the rice and the udad, then you make the dosa in the city. So all these things are important in the supply chain. So given this scenario, the more we focus on the scientific practices of processing and pre-processing in the private-public partnership segments, right from the farmer to the plate, will give us the benefits. And the consumer trends are changing from time to time. And given this scenario, when consumer trends change, process adaptation becomes imperative. So this is important because with every 10 years, if you see, the kind of products that are in consumption keep changing. So what was in vogue 30, 40 years ago is no longer in vogue today. So process application that was done in World War II times, which is known as canning. Canning was invented in World War II because when the armies went to war and when they came back in World War I, they were dying because there was no food to eat. So in World War II, they got a little, more, let's say, bright, and they said, all right, let's send canned food to them so they don't die when they come back. So the armies, when they retreated, Napoleon's army died because they had no food to eat. The realities, okay? There are realities where, because of which food processing came into play. But having said that, canning was a World War II technology. So we need to innovate, we need to adapt, we need to change. We cannot just stick to it and say, well, let's be with that. 40 years ago, we started freezing as a technology, and we used to freeze everything. So one size fits all, a Bata technology cannot work for freezing. It has to adapt itself to the changing needs, the changing crop, the items that are being made, the crop that is coming in, what condition it is coming in what condition it has to be consumed. Now, if consumption is dependent on a particular format, then it is better to give the frozen food in that format rather than in a format which yet that guy needs to defrost and again do something about it. So adaptation of the processes become very important. So let's say the younger generation does not know how to make so many vegetables, gravies, parathas, etc. So you'll find that the intervening layers of entrepreneurs would then start making these products and supplying them preservative free in the supply chain, which is frozen. But frozen is not conventionally frozen. These are technologies where you do not allow the water molecules in the product to become water crystals. So that's IQ of technology, by which the texture and the flavor of the product remains good during its entire life cycle until it comes onto the plate. So that's where technology makes a huge impact. Very recently, I'm sure all of you have read the article that was covered in the Times of India of the Sabji Koti. In any case, this young graduate, Nikki Kumar Jha, and his sister Rashmi, they founded, he's from IIT, and he founded the new kind of a fridge. Now, when we think of a fridge, all that we can think of is a thing where it has a door. You open it, you put things inside, they get cooled and they come out. Okay, but this guy disrupted that particular thinking and technology. He went on to apply that what the concept of why do food spoil. Now, in ripening, food spoil because of the discharge of ethylene from its surface. So the moment the ethylene gas comes out, it starts ripening the product more and more, and it progressively ripens. So disruption technology was, he says, you create a humidity segment in that area, and you make sure that the ethylene that is coming out, it is disintegrated by a small little electric performance that is there by circulation of ions, and you break this down into carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and a vapor. So because of that, the residual ethylene is diminished, and the crop, which otherwise would have got spoiled or over-ripened in your so-called fridge at home after 3 to 5 days, can now sustain for almost a month. Now, this disruptive new technology is very recent, and it is yet in the nascent stage. But if we can implement this into our integrated pack houses and co-processing at the farm level, we can actually, without hampering the naturality of the product, we can slow down its ripening and make sure that the wastages are minimized. About 30, 40 years ago, with the advent of atomic energy, irradiation of food was done as a normal practice. Now, that means irradiation means you subject the food to strong gamma radiation. Now, if you and I were to be subject to strong gamma radiation, it's like treating a cancer patient, you're killing cells. So when you kill cells in the vegetable or the fruit, what you're essentially exporting then is a dead body. There's no life in it. So if you were to buy these famous apples and those kind of fruits that come into the supermarkets, basically they're irradiated foods. They're dead food. Human beings are meant to eat live food, which have got live microorganisms, have got enzymes in it, which are living. So are those the best practices today? No. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, it may have been good to sustain the export of the commodity by sea, where they had to transit for 6 weeks. But these days, it's not so. So these days, we need to actually bring our thinking to what is best suited for today's technology. So like I said, IQ of freezing is there. One more new avenue that is coming up today is osmotic infusion of ingredients, which are prebiotic or probiotic. And these will raise the technical parameters of a particular crop and bring it to a desired level. At the same time, will help in preservation for a longer period of time. Now, this is a new disruptive technology, and commercialization is yet occurring right now. But there is a huge potential to enhance the life of the product by osmotic. It's not new. Osmosis is nothing new, but the technology of osmotic infusion of desired ingredients into a fruit or a vegetable is what is the new thing coming forward. Well, having said that about these two things, so we would like to now touch upon what is known as quality, because quality is a very subjective, word. What's good quality for you may be not adequate for me, or maybe too much for me. So when the United Nations, got together and they started addressing, that is in 50s, they started addressing the nation's, economic warfare that they had. When one nation said that my produce is good, and the other said, no, I'm rejecting it because it doesn't suit my norms. So for many years, this trade, issues subsisted till a committee was formed. And this committee was formed saying that, you know what, you need to have uniform quality parameters. So on one hand, they had uh, the committee that was the Codex Alimentarius, which was set out to define what standards should be for every product. So it took 20, 30 years of internation discussions and formalization. Still in late 80s, early 90s, they came out with the first draft of what product standards should be. So until then, let's say India had its standard of the food processing order. Okay. Now the FPO, let's say, determined that jam must have 68% total soluble solids. Otherwise, it was not jam. Now America had its benchmark at 65. In Europe, it was 45. So what happened is that if the European jam came to India, it would fail, because they said this is jam at 45, is jam for them. But for us, jam was only there at 68. Otherwise, it was not jam. So you started having international disputes. So the Codex Alimentarius was circulated, and countries were given up to 20 years time to imbibe and approve their own national product standards to be in line with the Codex. India aligned its standards in 2007 when it launched the new FSSAI regulations. So the FSSAI regulations is absolutely in line with the Codex standards. Similarly, most countries in the world, about 179 countries, also aligned their standards. So today you can say that a particular kind of product that is there in the market in India has the same benchmark as elsewhere in the world. So now it's possible to compare apple to apple. Earlier you could not. You could not compare a jam to a jam because they had different names. Somebody called it a preserve, somebody called it a conserve, somebody called it a jam, somebody called it a spread. And the different standards were put up for different countries, and they were all selling. It's not that they were not selling. That local community wanted it, and that's what they wanted, and that's what they got. Okay, so it's not wrong, but for cross-border trade, it didn't work. So the quality control mechanism had this Codex Alimentarius at its back. And along with it, the group of these UN nation guys, formed a committee to write the international standards. Now, international standards were originally conceived for the engineering industry. That is the ISO. ISO 9000 was originally launched for the engineering industry, but it quickly went on to the rest of the industries in a span of 5-10 years. When they said that if engineering industry it's good for, why not for all other industries? So they had at the core of the ISO 9000 was a quality management system. So the core was the quality management system which is class 4. And then there was class 5, which was the top management, class 6, which was resources, 7 was the product, and 8 was the analysis. 1 being the scope, 2 being the definitions, and 3 being the references. So every system in the world had these 8 clauses, okay, in the ISO, at that point in time. So whether you are a bank or whether you are an engineering company or whether you had anything or anybody who had a process in place, these guys had to benchmark their product, which is clause 7, to the international benchmark, and therefore they were, or which is represented by codex, and therefore it was possible to say that this particular company had its practices which were prevalent or in conformance to the ISO 9000. But the food industry said our challenges are more. Maybe I can have a jam which is at 65 or 68 degrees, which is what is now permitted. But how do I know whether it has other parameters in its processing which are in conformance? Did it come from a clean environment? Did it come from people who were having good hygiene practices? Did it come from clean and sound crop? Was there any microbial infusion in that which was eliminated later? So several concepts that came up and arguments that came up led to a new norm, a standard called the HACCP, the Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point. This is all to do with that clause 7 of ISO 9000. Okay, it is to do with that clause 7. They said that that particular clause has all the processing in place. So in that clause, they superimposed HACCP, the hazard analysis and critical control point, and that had to proven documented approach. By you should be able to document that from input to output everything is sound, proper, and in conformance. So if you had anything that had a potential cause for injury or illness, the keywords of HACCP implementation are anything that has the potential to cause injury or illness has to be eliminated. Again, I repeat, anything that has the potential to cause injury or illness has to be eliminated. Okay. So a burnt product may be bad to eat, but it's not going to cause injury or illness. So if you if you were to have a liquid which had too much acid in it, and if it burnt your system, then that was not good. So it had to be eliminated. So the concept was different from just documentation, which the earlier ISO 9000 was looking at, and it got into consumer safety. So that revolving the concept around consumer safety was the HACCP concept, which was a newer thing for the world at that point in time. It was in the late 90s and 2000s that you had the HACCP. And most people today are yet not very, confident about eradicating the drawbacks at every step. However, there are 7 principles and 12 steps. Okay, all that is good for the textbook. Like I said, the fundamental principle is that anything that has the potential to cause injury or illness has to be eliminated. So in a simple manner, if there are 5 things you are doing, you will write down each step in a very clear, defined manner. I took this, I did that, I did that, I did that, I did that. I washed it, I cut it, I ground it, I cooked it. Okay, suppose if I say I did these things. So at every step, he has to eliminate physical hazard, a chemical hazard, and a biological hazard. 3 hazards need to be eliminated and documented. So if my process is such that my subsequent step eliminates the hazard in the prior step, then the prior step is not critical. So as to say, if my subsequent step resolves a problem of the prior one, then the prior one doesn't pose a problem because the subsequent step has eliminated it. Okay. So simple way of approaching, scientific way of approaching a particular process will actually resolve the product issues, and what alone has to be critically observed and monitored, that alone is critically observed and monitored, and that will hold the product in good state. Now, if all the workers in an organization, all workmen, were to actually follow these concepts in their day-to-day practices while doing their work, then automatically no separate documentation would be required. But I can tell you, maybe about 20 odd years ago, when we got certified with ISO 9001. We were probably the first Indian food company to get certified. And the guys who had helped us getting certified were those who were involved with the earlier engineering gamut. So large multi-location international giants were there. So for them, they had to document the multi-location, multi-steps, multi-this, multi-that. So we had a huge number of documents for a small company employing a few 40, 50 people, had 10 people trying to run a system separately, left hand not knowing what the right hand was doing. And we took a year or two to understand ourselves and eliminate. From 450 documents, we came down to 50. A year or two later, we came down to 12. And today it subsists. And every year there is some change that goes on to make it more effective, to make it more valuable, to make it more functional in such a manner that the day-to-day activity actually covers the requirement. Now, this same thing can be applied across all industries. Now, if you were to be in any industry, making any commodity or selling any commodity, if you can, bring your stage-wise process into writing and then eliminate the business risk at each step and understand that if a subsequent step has eliminated the risk of the prior one, then that business is going to be more sound. Okay. And this particular concept needs to be brought into day-to-day documented practices with companies. So it's not just for the food. The same concept can be applied for anything, for a finance operation, for a jeweler, could be a trader, could be a retailer, could be anybody. But we can actually bring in tremendous change, value addition, and cost savings, okay, which is all about the modern practices that we need to bring in. I think I've taken almost an hour of your time, which was scheduled. And I must thank Mr. Gopi and all of you to have patiently heard me. And with your kind permission, I will throw it open for any kind of questions and answers on any of these topics or any issues that you think are relevant or associated with this. Mr. Gopi, can I hand it over back to you?
Gopi, with your permission, can I ask some questions?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Sir, my name is Vishwanath. Wonderful speech. I mean, very comprehensive. I have a couple of questions. My first question is, already there is a surplus of food. Now, if good scientific practice, is implemented, like educated people move back to the farms and start, will the surplus not become more surplus? And
sorry, tell me?
Yeah, and the inefficient farmers, the uneducated, inefficient farmers, will they not be eliminated in that process? This is my first question. My second question is, why processed food is costlier than the inefficiently farmed what is available in your shops, because it changes so many hands. It's not procured scientifically or in large quantities. It actually should be the other way. Processed food should actually be cheaper than what you buy in shops. These are my two questions.
Yes, you are absolutely right. So as far as the first one is concerned about the efficiency and surplus of the crop, now this is this, like I said, is a seasonal variance that goes from region to region, crop to crop, farm to farm, you can say. And like I said about tomatoes, okay, because of the herd mentality in growing, everybody wants to grow tomatoes, but the same farms could grow other crop too, which had good cropping patterns. But if the herd mentality draws the farmers to a particular crop and they all start farming the same thing, the demand is not going to be as good as the supply, and therefore there is a surplus, and therefore it's a degenerative crop, means that once it is ripened, nothing can be done. Processing in adequate facility is not available. Let's say tomato itself. If adequate processing was available, then they would convert that tomato into paste, etc., etc. But that's not happening at the right time. What happens is a season peaks for 10, 12 days in the herd mentality, because everybody sows around the same time and everybody harvests around the same time. So instead of that, if there is proper education and practice there, saying that, okay, demand is there for 1,000 tons. If we produce 1,200 tons after cropping wastage, etc., we will achieve that 1,000. Let's focus the rest of the land on other crops. You could grow so many other, each land is suitable to cultivate at least 40, 50 crops. Now, if we are able to dwell, most farmers do not grow more than 1 or 2 crops in a year. Okay. Some people are happy with only 1. Some people have 2. Rarely do you have a farmer who gets the 3rd crop. And intercropping, don't talk about it. Nobody wants to spend time, energy, and money doing intercropping. However, unless the farmer does multi-cropping and does intercropping, he cannot make money. His efficiency is dependent on being on the farm, but he doesn't want to be on the farm. He wants to be in the city. He wants to be, not going to work every day. A farmer must start working at 4, 5 in the morning, and he works till 10, 11 and gets back to work again at 3, 4 in the afternoon and works till evening. But how many of us are willing to do that? So unless the farmer is trained to go back to being a farmer, and you make his income higher by making processing available at his doorstep. Now, that's when you said about the pricing. Now, about the pricing of the processed commodity, today it is much higher than the unprocessed, because the processors buy through the year at rates which are determined by the market, not determined by the farmer. Now, if we are going to have integrated pack houses, let's say tomatoes. Today, the farmer gets an average of 1.5 rupees. The average consumer through the year pays 25 rupees. Average consumer. Some months you will pay 100, some months you will pay 20, average is 25. But the farmer gets only average of 1.5 to 2 rupees. Now, if that 1.5, 2 rupees is brought to 5, which is done in contract farming for tomato paste manufacturers, what they do is that they pay the manufacturer, the farmer, 5 rupees, but they pick up 400 truckloads, 800 truckloads a day, but in season. Now the season is limited. Okay, there are only 2 times in a year that tomato grows, and it is in a span of these 90 days or span of 45 days that this will peak and go out. Because the farmers have not evolved on the staggering of farms. So what they should do is stagger their farms, like you have like I told you about the red lady papaya. So if you were to go to the Nellore districts in the Koduru segment, there's a railway station on that which goes as Railway Koduru, which you go by rail to Bombay. After Tirupati comes Railway Koduru. From there, for the next 180, 200 kilometers on your right, coming all the way to Nellore, it's a huge extent of land which is growing red lady papaya. And like I said, it is feeding the whole country. Now that is a 3-month cycle which farmers have designated plots which have that based on their customers. They've got designated plots where the cropping will be done on day 1, then sowing, then day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 10, day 90. Like that, it goes cropping. So they never have an excess. They never have a problem. It's all by drip irrigation. And that area anyway doesn't get too much of rain. So they've actually made their soil fertile, suitable, and economically viable. And today they rule the market. So that example is a very good example of taking science into farming. So if we do that, can you imagine a papaya which retails at, let's say, at 40, 50 bucks a piece in your market is actually leaving that Railway Koduru even today at 7, 8 rupees a piece. So if you had good supply chain processes in place, you could give a cut papaya, which is frozen, okay, IQ frozen and sent to the market, and it could retail at 20, 25 bucks, cheaper than the papaya itself. And the inner fiber and the outer skin would go back into the soil as manure at that stage, which today we are losing because the outer skin and the inner fiber and the seeds go to garbage in the city. So we need to actually work on this, and we can make it cheaper, we can make it more effective. It is the integrated supply chain which will make this happen, and it has to be in the private-public partnership along with the farmer. It has to be a win-win scenario. It cannot be only me, only him, or only them. Okay, it cannot be promoted by government. It has to be a commercial enterprise making money. The farmer doesn't need our subsidy. Okay, the farmer, what he needs is help to make him scientifically improve. If we can help them to improve and get their income up, if 65% of the country becomes richer, the country is rich, which is where I think we need to focus on.
Why a cooperative model like Amul did not come in the farm sector?
Amul was driven by the government. Okay, so at that point in time in Gujarat, which is where the Amul segment took place, okay, it was driven by the government. Kurian and his four colleagues, Jhala and others that were there. Okay, these four people, Rindani, Jhala, and two more, I forget their names. But these five people were there spending government money in creating the cooperative. So after that, milk collection went up. Their challenges were, now what? Milk collection is going up. What do we do? So they had the first pilot dairy plant in Ahmedabad. It is called the Abad Pilot Dairy in Ahmedabad. So where they collected the milk and started processing it. They didn't know how to process milk. So they went abroad, they went to Denmark, they went to Sweden, they learned the better standards of milk processing, came back, and they started making good pasteurized milk. They started making cheese. So when that started picking up, the Anand Dairy came up. Then the National Dairy Development Board came up. And all these were promoted by the government. It was not a private-public partnership. So today, the Amul cooperative, yes, is owned by farmers, etc., all very right. But was it run by them? Was it driven by them in the initial 10 years, 15 years? No. I remember when I did my engineering in the 80s also, it was still managed by the NDDB and the IDC. International Dairy Corporation, the NDDB, was actually running Amul. Amul was otherwise just a dairy making milk or something packing. But all the brains came from NDDB. Kurian and others were moved to NDDB. So NDDB actually drove the milk revolution in the country. It's like what you have as Avin in Chennai. You got the Mother Dairy in Salem, in Bangalore, in so many other places. All these concepts were brought in by them. But being driven by the government is not a very great idea. And I think South was a pioneer in this because you had got these Arun ice cream people, the Hatson guys, who drove the milk collection into another level. You've got Kevin Care with Kevins, which have driven it to another level. We've got so many people who've been able to create that public-private partnership with farmers and create a good economical product, far better than what a government-driven enterprise could possibly give. I don't know, you must be knowing that the other private dairy milks are as expensive as Avin, maybe 1 or 2 rupees more. That little premium you pay for the little better product. So, I mean, this is a huge lesson that is there from the private-public partnership is the South Indian version of the dairy development. It was not necessarily cooperative. So each of these loose-ended the farmers of the milk got together and pooled in their milk. While there was an Avin collection center in their facility, so was Hatson, so was the other guy. So whoever gave them the best rate for their milk, they sold it to them. And that's what competition does. And that's exactly what we need to have happening across all the other segments. Right? Hope I've answered both.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Ramsamy, please go on with your question. Unmute and ask your question, please.
Good morning, sir. My name is Ramaswamy. I am from Annamala University, E&I batch 93 engineering. I have two questions, sir. The first thing is you are the pioneers in the food processing industry for over decades. You would have faced a lot of challenges over a period of time because a lot of changes have happened in the last 30-40 years in the area of food processing. What are the challenges you faced and how you were able to overcome those challenges from the competition? Number one, how you were able to stay more than ahead of the competition, and what are the challenges you faced with the relationship which you had with at the ground level, like for example at the farmer level, interaction level. And this is my first part of the question. The second part of the question is based on you are sharing your experiences that we need to stay close, very close to the farming community, and probably you can support them with the processing kind of an unit. So I have no prior experience. If you take me, I have no prior experience about farming or a food processing industry. Is there any knowledge we need to acquire before? Suppose you are going to have a startup on a food processing industry. Is there any knowledge-based learning which we need to acquire, or certification course which we need to acquire before going into the processing? Or is there any other way how we can venture into a food processing unit? And moreover, if you are going to establish a food processing unit in a rural area close to the farmer, the investment cost is going to be a little bit much more higher because you need to import you need to implement and incorporate the required amount of processing machineries based on the state of the art technology, so that for an economic economic production plan and processing. Hope you got my question.
Yeah, I got, it's not just two, it's many questions, but I'll try.
No, you can make it very simple. I know it's very difficult.
I'll try to answer as many as I can.
Okay.
One is that did we have problems and challenges? Yes, several. But to begin with, I'll take away the notion of my association with farmers as a producer. We are not buying from farmers. We buy from farming agents or from the farmer, but we sit in the city. Okay, we are not going to the farms to buy. I might have a deal with somebody growing something, but then he gives it to me because he gets a better price. But I am a small one-time farmer. Like us, there are at least 4.5 million factories making food products. But we are not organized enough to be dealing with farmers. We all deal with mandis. But talking about challenges, the biggest challenge that the food industry had is that governmental control, okay, until 2007, is that we were reserved to the small scale industry. Now, small scale definition changed from time to time. In early 80s, small scale was considered to be investment of 5 lakhs. 5 lakhs is nothing today. But at that time, 5 lakhs was a lot of money. In late 80s, it went up to 10 lakhs. Then progressively it went to 15, then 25, then 50, then 1 crore. Now MSME is at 5 crores. So what is happening is that governmental control was there till 2007, stating very clearly that food processing was reserved to the small scale. Now, because of which the investment levels were very, very low. And if I needed a state-of-the-art equipment, I could not bring it within 5, 10, 15 lakh of rupees. So in our Indian context, we call it jugaad. Okay. So you wanted to bring a cutting machine, you could not buy the best Herschel dicer from US. So you bought a jugaad machine made in India for 35,000 from Coimbatore. Okay. He made a wonderful job for 35,000. Nowhere else in the world you'll get it at that rate. Okay. But it was good technology at its price. Okay. But it's not as good as the best. But our problem was the regulation. So because of which we may have millions of food factories, but they're all in the small scale. Now, small scale is really small. We're talking about the neighborhood shop is that small, you know. If you were to walk into most of the food processing facilities, you would today hardly even call them as facilities. There'd be 1, 2,000, 3,000 square feet was considered to be large scale. A 3,000 square foot facility got a large scale license. Now, can you imagine if a 3,000 square foot facility was getting a large scale license? There was something wrong in our control. So then only he was allowed to make so many products. Okay. So otherwise you have to make only 1 or 2 products. You could move only this. Some were only reserved for cottage industry like papads and applams. So papad and applam industry never really grew as much across the country as it should have. Okay. So So one was the challenge was the governmental control. Fortunately, the government did away with it in 2007. Now, food industry is probably the only industry which has got 100% FDI available on the automatic route. We do not need anybody's permission to get FDI. Nobody's permission. Okay, so which is very, very, very good for the food industry. Now, the biggest challenge that the industry faces is generally the entrepreneur, like you said, is not technically qualified and therefore he needs to acquire knowledge. Now, acquisition of knowledge in today's world is extremely simple. Thanks to COVID, it's all become online. Okay, so we should in fact thank COVID that all of us, like today, we are talking online. We are in a position, otherwise you would meet in some hall and you would have one drab, some 15 people, 20 people coming in late will disturb, 5-10 people leaving early will disturb. And then whether you really got the meaning of the meeting or not was left to your presence of mind. But now when it's online, the person who is actively engaged at that time is actively engaged. Those who are not maybe paying attention somewhere else, but the meeting carries on with its own sense of seriousness. So with this scenario in place, we are able to effectively engage with entrepreneurs, like let's say you said, who want to gain knowledge. And we've actually done this in the COVID with a lot of the internees who are with us across from various colleges, where we run the entire internship online, including hands-on training. So we will give them a list of things to do. We'll get on to online training, online execution. So this has helped the industry evolve to a point where you can be faceless. I must also thank COVID that during the time when I had the largest number of internees, I actually was down with COVID. So I couldn't step out much as I wanted to. Otherwise, we would step out and show a few things and come back, home. But then since being down with COVID, I couldn't even leave my room. So I was forced to innovate our training in such a manner that we can start training people online. Show them online, this is what needs to be done. This is how it is to be done. You have to take it to this level. You take this meter, refractometer, you put it to your eye, then I'll show it in the camera. See this is how it is. This is how it is. So we got innovation to its training levels, which are needs which were there. So yes, we need to have some amount of training. I'm not saying you need to be an expert. You need to have the training to make sure that the employee that you bring in doesn't make a fool out of you. That's about all. You need to have the control parameters. You want to get into any business today, you don't need to be an expert in that business. But if you want to employ people to do things, you should know the checkpoints. Basically, what you purchase, how you purchase, what you process, how much you process, what's the wastage, what is the critical process, how do you control it, how do you document it? These are the reasons. If you have put in this much, how much should I get? If you have your basis right, getting into the industry on a remote basis is very simple. Let's say you come from a village area originally. Originally, all of us come from some village. Nobody is from the city. We're all migrants to the city. Okay, we are occupying a space here when originally our village may be hundreds of kilometers away. We have even forgotten our roots there. Okay, but if today, if you bring back that, our thinking back to its roots, and it's like you said, if I want to set up something, it's extremely simple. At the pre-processing level, you don't need high-tech, internationally competitive equipment. You need simple stuff: grading, cleaning, sorting. Today, when you get agro produce that comes to your shop, before it comes to the shop, it comes to the back end of that retailer. It's a nightmare. If you were to go to see the back end of organized retailers, I can tell you by one name, there's an retailer called Waycool. They've got a state-of-the-art backend in Chennai city where they bring in all the crop that comes, and each piece of that agro produce is critically checked, cleaned, and put away. It's washed, the crates are washed. The way it is handled is what is ideally suited for human consumption. So it's not as simple as, I did some little bit cleaning and put it on the shop, which is what most people do when they bring it from the mandi, or when the mandi vehicle drops to the shop. about 8 to 10% of that is soil or soil leftovers, it is leaves, etc. So it's not what is desirable. So such people like these who create these chains, you've got Reliance, okay, which have got their chains, you've got more which have got their chains. Each of these retailers or e-tailers, as you call them, have their own back end, like Big Basket and all. They have a back end which dwells on that produce substantially to make sure that the produce that comes to you is good and the bad ones are eliminated. So that's, I think we've answered one area that you can get the expertise, have with minimal one. And the other one of yours was
the setting up of a unit.
Yeah, setting up of the unit, like I said, is extremely simple. If you decide to support, you should know which are the crops that you will be supporting. So like I said, in any given area, there are about 40 to 50 crops that ideally grow in a particular area. If you have a cluster of farmers, then you need to have a dialogue with them to understand which are the things that are growing. So if you've got avarakai or you got whatever kind of crop growing there, then suitable to that crop, what is the first mile processing required of sorting, cleaning, washing, packing, pre-packing, making it ready to go to market. Now, all the wastage there goes back to the farm as manure, including the overripe ones, including the kacha ones. The kacha ones that are plucked, I've got no value in the supply chain. They're not going to ripen. Okay, so even that needs to go back. So that particular, it is mulched back into the soil. Okay, so it's no great technology. And as you add processing units, okay, you will need to have people who are food technologists or food science graduates, etc. Right? So that's where my challenge was in the last 20 years or so. As we grew in the food processing industry, we found that we did not have technically qualified people. So I was talking around with lots of colleges, universities, and I found friends with similar thinking in the Avinashi Lingam University, at Karunya, at Kongu, at Periyar in Salem, at Madras University, Anna, SRM, and some of the other colleges which I'm associated with. And these are the people who said that, yes, we agree with you. Let's do one thing. Let's make our people educated enough to start working after they graduate. Now, the truth is that most of our graduates are not employable when they come out. And that is because they are not exposed to industry's requirement. So I said, let's do one thing. From the day they join the college, their curriculum must be so designed that it is industry specific. So food industry specific curriculum must go to food industry. Some other kind of curriculum will go to some other industry. From that industry it should go in, and they should actively engage people from the industry to give internship every semester. So there will be visiting faculty, there will be internships, so they will get hands-on knowledge from people in the industry. And by the time they finish their 4-year course, right, they should be having at least 9 months of experience in the industry. Now, this gives them a leading edge over somebody else who is not having that exposure. And I can tell you one thing, in the last 20 years, almost all the food technologists, almost all, are from South India. Okay. So I've been fortunate enough to be associated with 20 such institutions. Right? Very few other than this. When we started, 30 years ago, you had few and far apart. You had the TNAU in Coimbatore. You had the Agricultural College at Pune. You had the Agricultural College at Parbhani in Maharashtra. You had the college in Karnal in Punjab. And you had DMET in Bombay. Period. It started with that and ended with that. So other than that, you had hotel managing institute, hotel management institutes, a few and far apart. One in Bombay, one in Chennai, like that. So there was people in this industry were never trained. So thanks to, the fact that more and more people got into food engineering as such, it gave them a wider knowledge. Now, as we all know, because most of you are from Annamalai, and some of you must be engineers also. So you have a scenario in the first year, you've got common subjects. You will have machine design, you'll have mechanics, you'll have hydrodynamics, you will have so many things that are there, hydraulics, etc., with so many common subjects, carpentry, smithy. The idea is to open that person's mind that, when I start applying, I should have basic knowledge in everything. I may be a specialist civil engineer, but do I know basic or not? I may be a specialist metallurgist, but do I have the basics or not? If I don't have my basics sound, I'm no good. So what we do, what I started doing, rather I should say, as an advisor to these colleges, is that we started making modules. Today I've got about 30 modules where we start with basic science, basic physics for food technologies. And then we've got modules for specific products. Somebody for jam manufacturing, somebody for sauce manufacturing, somebody for vegetable process cleaning, etc., somebody for only cut vegetables. Idea is that he needs to perfect this. While he may have more knowledge about so many things, what is that he needs to perfect? So I may not be a perfectionist in everything, but I need to be perfect about that one thing which I need to commercialize. So which is my focus to the industry is right now, is to help them focus on that one area of expertise and develop that. Let him go up to a point, her to go up to a point where, talking about him and her, almost 85% of the food technologists are girls and they're not boys. Because boys prefer doing, getting into software coding, etc. But there also the girls have taken over, I think now, in the last few years. So we need to bring back the thinking, on this expertise and focus on one area. And I hope that is answering yours. Yes, there are modules which you can quickly learn on an online course. You can learn in 4 weeks or 8 weeks, and you can become fairly competent in a particular area.
Sure.
If you have farmers and if you have other people whom you also want to, train, even that can be done.
Probably. Okay.
Like I said, online today, thanks to COVID, so many good things have happened. School children are learning only online.
Sure.
So it's not impossible. We could never imagine this 2 years ago. Right? Today we are actually doing it.
Thank you very much, sir. And probably if you can share your number and email with Mr. Gopi, then it will be great.
Certainly, I should do that.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
So Venkateshan?
Okay, sir, this is Dhanshekaran. It was really an excellent presentation. Okay. My question is on ripening of fruits.
Okay.
Some unusual, unfair practices are done, especially bananas.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on that one, sir? And I have one more query after completing this.
No, it's not only bananas. Okay. So all vegetable produce, unfair, unscientific, what we call it, is actually only accelerating the ripening process. So like I mentioned in my talk about one IIT graduate, Nikki, and his sister Rashmi, okay, who brought about this new refrige, which controls the shelf life. Okay, it's called Sabji Koti, which was there in the Times of India a couple of days ago. Now, what they do is that they disintegrate the ethylene as it is emitted from the fruit or the vegetable, and they break it down into hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and vapor, and thereby they delay the ripening. So this unethical process that we call off is nothing but adding more ethylene to the environment so that the ripening becomes faster. So that ethylene to the environment is by putting water over calcium carbide. And that reaction takes place and ethylene gas is liberated, and therefore that ethylene gas goes to ripen the product faster. As far as ripening of the product is concerned, it is still done in the presence of ethylene gas. So to that extent, it is not unethical. It is improper because you're trying to accelerate the ripening when science by nature doesn't want it to. It's like making a 5-year-old an adult. A 5-year-old is a 5-year-old. You can never become an adult. But because you dress him up like an adult doesn't mean that he becomes an adult. Internally, he still remains 5-year-old. So this is exactly what unethical practices do. So what was the one was that and the other is?
So thank you. And one more thing is the cold practice. I mean, the cold storage, in spite of all subsidies, it has not taken off. Can you elaborate on that one?
That is why we as entrepreneurs believe that it is government's duty to do everything. We don't believe in public-private partnerships. Okay. But the day you start believing in public-private partnership, the highways in India are not built by the government anymore. Okay, we've got the fastest making of highways in the last decade. In the last 1 year, we have made more highways than we made in the last 3 years. And it's all in the public-private enterprise. So if simple things like this, if we say that let's take the responsibility for this, let us make it happen. Why are we dependent on today? I don't know whether you know, but every district in this country has a lapsing budget, a cash budget of 10 crores for developing cold storages, has a lapsing budget. I call it lapsing budget because no district in the country wants to put up a cold storage. Now, you may ask why. I say he'll put it up. Who's going to run it? Do you expect a government babu to run it? Why should he run it? And why should he run it effectively? There is no incentive for him. No? Who's going to, and if he does anything, he'll only get a CBI inquiry on him. Why did he do this? Why did he do that? And therefore, if public-private enterprise takes up, every district has a budget of 10 crores. So what district do you come from, sir, originally?
I come from Tuticorin.
Tuticorin. Okay. So in Tuticorin itself, in your district, there is a subsidy available. So are you aware of what crops are effectively growing in Tuticorin area?
Sir, mostly it is rain-fed crops. Okay. Like chili, groundnut and all. Paddy is not there prevalent. Okay.
Paddy is not the only crop, no? And
what, sir?
Paddy is not the only crop.
Maize and banana is also there. Maize and banana.
And there is coconut. Okay, there is so many things that are there in your area. When you say rain-fed, why can't we do drip irrigation? What prevents, if you go 10 kilometers out of your town, you got barren lands. Why do we have barren lands? Because nobody has done agriculture on those. Fallow lands. If you start the Israeli example of creating fertile land on barren land was very simple. Extremely simple. To give you an idea, what they did is coir rope. Okay, it's a natural ingredient. So coir rope was knotted and made small squares, of 1 inch by 1 inch, and they put it over the entire land and they put twigs to support it up. There are no nails or no metal, twigs to support it up. Every 6 inches, a twig is there to hold it up. Then they fill that up with foreign soil, means soil from a neighboring district, was topped on top, which was agro-friendly. Could be red soil, black soil, whatever it is, only for that 1.5 inches. Okay. And before putting this, they dredged the soil. I mean, they plowed the soil, then they put the coir and they put the soil on top. This Israeli technique of conversion of farmlands from fallow lands to farmlands takes only 3 years. In 3 years' time, only one effort of putting the first soil and this, in 3 years' time, the concept is first year's crop is mulched back in. First year's 3 crops are mulched back in. That means the soil is enriched with nitrogen, etc., by mulching 3 crops back into the soil. Then you got the second year's crop. They say take only 1 crop, mulch 2 back in. Third year, take 2 crops, mulch 1 back in. Fourth year onwards, you got a farmland where you can take 4 crops and one intercropping cash crop without a problem. And this, they converted fallow lands into agri lands. Israel per se is in the Mediterranean region. All their lands were all barren and fallow. But you can't say that about what they've done. Wherever they've gone, the Israeli contribution to the American market also is very high. Okay, so similarly, in wherever country, whichever countries that they were helping in, they were also trying to help in India. It's not that they weren't, but we didn't take them as friendly input other than for defense. So only for defense and other reasons we cooperate with, and aerospace we cooperate with Israel, or for military we don't take it for cropping. But if you start implementing that module, we can convert almost all our fallow lands into agro lands in a span of 3 to 5 years. But it requires effort, it requires continuity, maintenance, and a certain determination. It doesn't require so much money. Surely it doesn't require government money. Okay, if government is willing to give subsidy, fine, because finally we are going to earn from that crop. Government is not going to earn from the crop. Correct?
Excellent reply, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Venkatesh, please go on.
Okay. So, Amit sir, thank you so much. I think you've packaged this 1 hour into so much of information. We are trying to wrap around our heads around that kind of information you shared. Thank you so much for that. I have two questions, sir. The first is, I wanted to understand and have your view on these dehydrated vegetables and the fruits, the technology around that, and also the kind of acceptance which is there in the market, both in India, outside India, for these dehydrated vegetables and the fruits, particularly in the context where you are explaining something back about the demand supply distortion which happens, and how much this kind of a technology can ameliorate problems faced by the demand supply issue. That's the first question, sir. The second question I have is slightly broad based. In the market, we keep seeing the shelves being replaced and constantly replenished with a lot of processed foods. More and more of processed foods are coming in. So there is also this unnerving feeling which we have, particularly with respect to having seen COVID and all the stuff, that preservative processed foods are not the way to go, and probably the fresh foods are the way to go, immunity related stuff. So I wanted to have your view on, but however, I keep seeing the processed foods, the labels, plenty of labels are coming up repeatedly in every other shelf in the supermarkets. I wanted to have your view on, if one were to put a bet, put a penny on, say, a real fresh food market or the processed food market, as from an investor point of view, which one will you suggest, given the context of the growth potential which is available in these two, sir? These are my two questions, sir.
Sure. So first I'll address the dehydrated one. Okay, now I don't know how many of you are aware that we are probably one of the world's largest exporters of dehydrated foods. So onion in about 10 formats, white and red and pink onions, and so many other items that are there. Garlic in also 10 formats. We have large factories near Bhavnagar, which is essentially a dry area. And there are such huge factories that each one does about 100 to 500 tons a day. Okay, so, and it's no great technology. Every year, 5 factories more are being added there. So they procure their vegetables, etc., from all over, from Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, etc., Punjab, and it is dehydrated there. The climate is more suitable, but that doesn't prevent us from doing one in Chennai. After all, it's climate control. Humidity control is very important. And then you have commercial dehydration equipment, which is all Indian. Gone are the days when you need to import plants. So the world over, we export such a lot of dehydrated vegetables that you can't imagine. Okay, onions in every form, garlic in every form, and now you've got every Indian vegetable also is being exported now in the dehydrated form. The good thing about most of the dehydrated stuff is that it rehydrates within 30 minutes. We rehydrate with 30 minutes in warm water. It can rehydrate by steaming in 10 minutes. And it rehydrates to at least 90% of the original product. Now, in dehydration, what happens is that there are certain enzymatic actions that take place. Okay, so the product is no longer, let's say, living, it is suspended life, because the water content is brought down to 3%. And while air is available, water is not available to feed. And therefore, the activity gets suspended. It doesn't die. Okay, the 3% holds the suspended activity. But when you rehydrate it, the activity starts like fresh.
Okay.
So dehydration is a fantastic option. Now, what is new happening in that area is, which is not there in Gujarat as yet, where Mahua, where all these plants are, they've got hundreds of plants making thousands of tons a day, but they don't have a facility to osmotically infuse nutrients and prebiotics, etc., that are desired prior to dehydration. So, for example, we will say we take a carrot. Now, carrot has got about 86% moisture. It is dehydrated till it comes to 3% moisture. But if I were to osmotically infuse, that means I have dry carrot and 3%, which is equal to, it is about, so it comes to about 17%. Okay, 17% is the residual portion for my carrot, okay, in the dehydrated form. But if I were to add 23% as osmotically infused nutrients, which were desirable for the product it is meant to go to, I could infuse it by prebiotic fiber, by whatever nutrients that are required, by vitamins, or whatever I could do, and overage it with shelf life stability requirements, and then give an input which is at 40% instead of 17%, and then take it to 3% moisture. My rehydrated product will perform better than the natural one. B, it will be ready to use format. If I want to have, let's say, a pickled carrot which is dehydrated. Okay, so it may be a mango pickle which is dehydrated. Now you can't think of it today. But if I were to do it, it will not come down to that level of 3% moisture. Even with 17-20% moisture, it will survive because my salt content would make it go up. My salt content in a pickle is about 10%. But if I were to take it to 25, you can't eat it as it is. You need to rehydrate it. So imagine you bought a bottle of pickle or a packet of pickle, you took it out, you took one spoonful, put two spoons of water in it, stirred it and turned it. 15 minutes later, you got the most exotic pickle on your table. Okay, so it's a matter of implementing new ideas, and by fusion of technologies, it's just not one. You need to fuse different technologies, bring it together, and it's economical. It's not that we need to reinvent the wheel. That guy who is producing 1,000 tons a day, we give it to him. He produces that also for us and gives it. We don't need to don't need to generate new dehydration facilities. We need to generate the concept and go with it. The same, he's trying to do some cleaning, washing, and dehydrating. While that we'll infuse the osmotic also. So it's a matter of concept-driven processing without adding more capital in the generation of the end product. But the end product will fetch at least 5 times the price. So the economy of scale and the enterprise would both gain more money in this. Right? So that was one thing, was the dehydrate. The second thing you mentioned was?
I was talking about the processed and the...
Yeah, where would you put your money?
Yeah.
Now today, fresh food that comes to the market on the shelf, the question is how fresh it is. Was it harvested yesterday or day before? Because fresh is considered anywhere up to 4 days. Then when pre-harvesting, was insecticide sprayed on it? Was it washed away? Was it cleaned? Was it pre-processed? Most of the fresh produce that you see on the shelf, if you were to minutely notice, you find kire, you'll find soil on the root. Okay. You'll find they think it is damn good to have soil on the root. No, it's not. Soil is meant to be kept behind the farm. It should not come on the shelf. It has to be washed. It has to be, brought in without pesticide, without anything. Then it is fresh. So fresh food, if it is really fresh, is where I would bet on. Okay, but that's not happening as yet. And therefore, you bet on processed foods. Now, in processed foods, you need to bet on products which do not have added preservatives. So there are, like I said, World War II technologies canning. Okay, so canning has evolved further into packing in glass bottles. I don't know whether you buy olives or you buy any of these products in the market, right?
Yeah.
Which are bottled. Now those are packed and processed in the same manner as cans. Okay, there is no great rocket difference, no technology difference in the two. Yes, methods may change, hygiene will change, but basically it is the same technology at work. It's called very high temperature and time. So for very high temperature, you hold it for a particular time and you bring the microbial factor of F0 to 0. That means at one particular time, all this is scientific jargon, okay? But the truth is that you want the microbes to suspend activity. Basically, it can never become sterile, because after you open it, the microbes start living again. There is no way you can kill other than gamma radiation. Like I mentioned, no, there are these apples, etc., that come into the country. They are irradiated. They're dead food. It's dead food. It can never, if you were to plant plant a ton if you want, you won't get even a sapling out of it. It's dead food. Now, dead food is good for the dead. It's not good for the living. Human beings eat live food. Whatever we eat has life. Be it your vegetables, be it your fruits, be it whatever else that you are eating. It had life in it before it came to your plate, or at least reasonably before it came. 1-2 days before it came to your plate, it had life in it. So we should focus ourselves on minimally processed foods. Foods that have only that much processing or that much preservative as is essential in our current context of handling today. But going forward, we have to bet on moving to without preservatives, moving to fresh in the long term. If our supply chain is strong, we can have a fresh market supply every day right through the year. It's only a question of how good you maintain your integrated supply chain. Because the same thing as what you did in the bottle when you did your pasteurization, the same thing happens when you do it to quick freezing down to -20 degrees. What you do is you suspend microbial activity. You're only suspending it. IQF is a master processing technology for that. Instead of blast freezing or freezing conventionally, in IQF, what I said is that the water molecule doesn't become an icicle. So because it doesn't become an icicle, it doesn't spoil the texture and the flavor of the product. So you need to merge technologies and you need to bring in and then say, yes, we will bet our money on this kind of a supply chain. The day is not very far where you will have fresh food supply stores with people like you who take up the challenge. It's not very expensive. I don't need to reinvent. There are people who supply IQF food. There are people who grow fresh. We just need to make sure that the fresh reaches the IQF guy and the IQF guy gives it to you. Cold supply chain is available. We just need the entrepreneur to bring up the investment in the product. Returns are available. I can tell you it's a very profitable business to be in. It just needs an enterprise to actually get started. Once you get started, this herd mentality will occur. Once you start, another 100 will follow. But somebody has got to start. One chai fellow starts and then the kings will follow, the queens will follow, the times will follow, everybody will follow. But one guy started and so everybody followed. So same way, no? Somebody has got to start and then follows the chain. Right?
I just have one rejoinder question to that, sir. Just a small. You talked about there are supply chains which is already existing per se. We not really reinvent the wheel, and we just need to cobble together or stitch together a couple of technologies in the right fashion so that you produce a very profitable venture. If I had to ask you broadly as to what is the kind of a minimum capital which should be required so that we don't become that 100 square feet or 200 square feet room guy, nor not to do something which is just for the kind of for the sake of doing it. Can you just put a kind of
I have my own views on this. When you are going to start up a new thing, I believe that 100 200 square feet is a damn good idea. Okay, Okay, it's just the reverse. It's a damn good idea. It minimizes your investment and it minimizes the capital required and the storage facility required in the freezing segment as well as in the display selling segment. But instead of having 1 or 2, 100, 200, you start with 1 or 2 and replicate that in your city to have 100 of those. See, it's a question of replicating. Now, as far as the, let's say IQF facilities are concerned, they're listed everywhere. The one Google search will tell you how many IQF guys are there. In the South India, there are about 40, 50 guys who are large plants. Okay. And every large plant has spare capacity today. Nobody is overworked, right? Nobody is surplus capacity. I mean, everybody has surplus capacity. Nobody is so tied up that they don't have time. What we need to do is in that neighboring area, you need to procure that fresh food which you think is fresh, have the pre-processing done of washing, whatever, cleaning, de-stemming, etc., bringing it to the IQF facility, freezing it, and in a small cold reefer truck, depending on the distance, you can invest in a 5-ton vehicle, a 3-ton vehicle, a 2-ton vehicle, or even a 500 kg reefer auto is available today, okay, which is EV. So not that, okay, you get a 500 kilo EV auto, which is reefer now. So everything is available. Today, you don't need to reinvent the wheel in the supply chain. Supply chain, fortunately, there are players offering you reefer transport also, but for a price. They'll say 15 bucks a kilo. It may be too much for you today. So you say, okay, why don't I do my own? I can save money. Fair enough. If you have the capital to buy your own equipment, great. But if you don't, then you will spend that 15 bucks and bring it. So start with one, master that business module, and then quickly replicate to 10, 20, 50 that is there, because the early bird catches the worm. So if you are the first one in that segment, it doesn't require major investment. You can maybe a 10, 20 lakh or rupees is great to begin with. The good thing is government gives subsidy for everything. Okay. You buy reefer storage, they give you a subsidy. You buy this vehicle, they give you, there's so many things are there. So if you've got, let's say if you've got 50 lakhs of your own, you will can organize 50 lakhs in subsidies.
Okay.
It's possible. A cold storage has got a 50% subsidy. So depending upon how you model your enterprise, you can stretch your capital without getting stretched yourself. Your capital investment can be stretched. Don't ever stretch your working capital. Industry in India dies quickly because of a confusion between working capital and capital in assets. Because there is a cross flow between the two, working capital gets diverted to assets and therefore industry dies. So we got to be very careful that working capital remains purely working. It should not go away into assets.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Aruna Kumar.
Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Amit, sir.
Morning.
It was an excellent session. I don't think even you had any material to for this session. All comes out of experience. That was excellent.
Almost so.
I have a basic question. Somebody who wants to get into this industry afresh, where do you suggest him to get into? I know it is individual.
First have a chat.
Individual matters.
No, first have a chat. Okay. We'll see what the, what the person is aspiring to be or to do. What is the kind of time, energy, money he's willing to put in. What is his area of comfort? And after that, we can try and target that area of comfort into the enterprise he wants to build. See, if you're going to be working out of your passion, then you're never working. You're only being passionate. So that's the important thing. You need to be passionate about what you're doing. And if you are passionate, then you're not working. You're just driving your passion. That's what I've been doing for the last 40 years. I just drive my passion. So you said I don't have ready material. It's there. I always would have something to fall back upon, no matter how many times we address. Because every issue or every webinar is targeted to a particular cause. So we should not deviate from that. No? Correct. But at any time anybody wants to set up anything, have a chat, let's discuss it on Zoom meetings or whatever, on WhatsApp calling or whatever. Have a chat, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour chat, understand what the enterprise wants to be, what is the time frame, what is the investment, what are the options. Then we can come draw back options, we can draw contingencies on learning expertise, on developing people, on developing that. And in a structured manner, in 3 to 6 months, we can help them set up their facility. There's nothing that happens magically overnight.
Yeah, definitely.
The only thing that we can do overnight is sit and talk to each other. Then implementation goes back into your court. No,
Exactly.
I can only volley it back. Then you need to play.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Shakti.
Sir, my name is Shakti, sir. I am from ESOF. Actually, we promote farmers producer companies.
Okay.
Really, it's a thought-provoking. Whatever you said, I noted down everything. It's really out of your experience, you shared everything. Sir, what we are trying to do, we want to develop few FPOs as a model FPOs. Like they involve in vegetable, they aggregate and sell. And some FPOs as a grow to the level of they run the primary processing centers, where the infra support is given by government, like that they are there, sir. Now we have a concept called Krishak Mitras. Krishak Mitras are like a pair or supportive workers who support this board of directors and the CEO of the producer company. Like every 100 farmers, we want to have one Krishak Mitra, sir. When come to the food processing related things, sir, do you have any model or can we please? Our intention is that few of our FPOs, these Krishak Mitras are there. Already we identified some village level, a PUC dropout, that kind of people are there, sir. Can we train them on a pre-processing things?
Certainly.
So
that is exactly what.
Yes, sir.
If we have the basic FPOs structure ready and the willingness to do processing, you've already won 90% of the battle. Now, 10% is training and implementation. So I am with you. We can engage on whatever mutually acceptable terms. We can we can get down to the village level, make sure that every farmer benefits. Unless he benefits, we will not. See, his income first. I will get my income after he gets his, which is what society must look at. And I'm with you. I'm very happy that your company is already promoting and doing this. My time is for you, sir. 24 hours, 7, right through the year, as much time as you want. I'm with you. We can travel. I can go to the spot. I can train. We can make modules and document them so that even after us, the modules will go on. One day we will be gone, but the modules have to stay.
Thank you, sir. Can I get your number, sir? Through maybe
certainly. We hope we will share it today.
Thank you very much, sir. Just only one incident. Where recently our one FPO in near Arilur, sir. They have small onion, 350 farmers growing onion, and they sold it for only 15 to 20 rupees per kg. They are unable to do much of the value, removing the things and also. So, but in Kerala, we are getting it for 70 rupees per kg.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That demand and supply, if we are able to put our minds together, you are saying 70. In Maharashtra, in Matunga, it is sold at 150 rupees.
Right, sir.
So if you bring it to where the South Indians want it, in Delhi, it will be 200 rupees, sambar onion.
Okay,
so the question here is that you should know where to bring it and where to sell it. If you want to sell it in Arilur, you'll get only 15.
Right, sir.
If you bring it to Chennai, at least you'll get 40, 50 for it.
Okay.
No?
Sure, okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
We can work this out. There's not a problem.
Sure.
Done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Right.
Bala, please go on, Bala.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Balamurugan. I have two questions, sir. One is what type of products you are processing in your mega foods? Second question is we are doing biodegradable sustainable packaging, food packaging. And also one company is Chapak from Israel. They are doing some modified atmospheric packaging. And one Bioan from Spain, they are doing, as you mentioned, this ethylene absorber. We put together in modified atmospheric packaging with ethylene. The shelf life of banana is extended up to 40 days. We also trialed them at Tripur, one banana exporter. What is the scope of this opportunity, sir? Just please explain.
So
Sir.
there is a huge potential. But before we're delving into the technology that you are implementing, I must confess that CFTRI developed the banana processing about 40 years ago. Not many people here in India are willing to go with it because it is limited to only the exporters of banana. They don't want to bring it down to the local Indian banana. So the banana which is exported goes in a normal, let's say, I can't say reefer, in a 15-degree container, it travels the world for 40 days on the sea before it gets onto the shelf. So this is a banana dip that is given in a method that CFTRI developed 40 years ago. And the people who are successfully doing this are doing this for 40 years. Only thing is they failed to give it for the Indian market. Indian market, they say, will not absorb, but we are paying a huge price. Right? So if you see a banana abroad, which is from India, it is remaining good on the shelf for 2 weeks after it reaches. It is good for 6 to 8 weeks. So why 40 days? It is good for 6 to 8 weeks, does not have modified packaging. It does not have an ethylene absorber. All it is done is that it is coated with something without irradiation. So this particular technology is available to buy from CFTRI. Just by Googling, you can buy banana processing technology by CFTRI and just have to pay a small price. It's not very expensive. It costs some 50,000 or 1 lakh rupees. They give you the entire documented technology, including vendors of the equipment and everything. So, well, that's for bananas. So,
it is not reached the farmers, sir. Ground level, it is not reached.
That's what I told you. Few exporters are holding on to it and not allowing the farmers to get to it. But what does it need? It needs to spread the word. Hey, you know what? CFTRI has got it. Why you want to reinvent the wheel? I don't need to go to Spain. I just need to send an email to CFTRI and make an online payment. The document comes to me online the very next day. Gone are the days when documents were sent by courier. The entire technology is available for mass consumption to the Indian user. In fact, to any user in the world. By just going to CFTRI, they've got hundreds of technologies which are commercially viable. Okay. Which one of the early ones was the banana one. Early, because India's banana was fighting with Philippines. So Philippines banana is yet selling more in the world than the Indian banana. Because we are confused with the growing of the banana. We've got 20 varieties, where the Philippine guys are one variety. Okay, they say we'll grow only this, we'll not grow 20 varieties. Here we take pride in growing 20 varieties of banana. Okay, nothing wrong in it because we've got consumers for all 20. But if you want to export, there is only one variety that gets exported and there is only one way to treat it. So we treat it and send it, as simple as that. And as far as one was the banana and second thing you mentioned was the packaging. So in packaging also, there is huge strides occurring. So, and what we are making, we make RTS beverage, we make sauces, jams, we make pickles, mayonnaise, and we make specialty foods which are retorted. We make ready-to-eat foods and chutneys. We have a small bakery which is for consumption in Chennai. It's available at all the nuts and spices and other shops. It's a conventional bakery, but we try to do unconventional baking by value addition in the product, by giving it as natural as possible, as vegan as possible, not even just vegetarian. Most of our products are vegan. That means although it may not have much value to the user directly today, but health is something which is to be implemented by experience rather than just talking. So all our bakery foods are vegan in nature. We make some whole range of breads, buns, and we make some specialty breads. We make hummus, Lebanese items. We make hummus and baba ganoush and those kind of things. We make vegan cakes. That means there is no milk product also in that. We make cakes, cupcakes. We make a whole range of things. Okay, but it's passionately done. Our scale may not be the largest that you will see, but it's okay, good enough. We are at a survival scale in all that we do. And passion drives it. Education is open, and we teach everybody who's associated with us. So we help them set up enterprise. I believe that there is no competitor. If you help somebody, he doesn't become your competitor. He becomes your friend in the business. Business itself is so large in India. We are the world's largest population, almost. We're so big that our market is so large. We don't need to worry about consumers. We need to only worry about making good products. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Your own store, sir, where it is available, sir, your
I
product?
sell it with others. I can do one business at a time. I manufacture. I don't sell. I mean, since I give it to shops to sell. So nuts and spices and such other shops, they will be selling. Okay. So
Okay, sir. We will try, sir. Thank you.
Most welcome. Most welcome, sir.
What is
One
the
last
brand
question
name,
we
sir?
can take.
Brand name?
It's Ariha.
Okay.
Ariha is, you'll see in the invite, no, which Mr. Gopi has sent.
Sir, what is the scope for jerkins, sir? This
Jerkins,
Velry.
it's an
Export.
export market.
Can you elaborate more on that one, sir? Export scope.
Scope is phenomenal. If you can produce 100 containers a day, there is potential for 100 containers a day. See, there was a time when Poland and Netherlands were leading the market. Okay. Today, thanks to their issues, they're not leading the market, but we were leading the market. Then we had some issues in the processors and the farmers, and because of which the farmers were not getting the returns. So they stopped producing gherkins. Now it's coming back. You need to ensure that the farmer gets money. If the farmer gets money, gherkin industry is very big. You can't imagine how big it is. Every household in Europe and US buys pickled gherkins. Every household. Okay, there's not a single, be it a burger, be it everywhere a pizza, there is a pickled gherkin on it. So anywhere in the world. So you can imagine how big the market is. It's huge. And it is native to South India. Okay, you got gherkin growing areas around Dindigul, around Bangalore, Hosur, Kolar. You got gherkin areas near Coimbatore. There are such large gherkin growing areas. It requires a particular climatic condition, which is naturally available to us. We don't need to go about doing rocket science farming. But only thing is, we need to tie up with the farmer and make sure that he owns. Give him farming support, like the other gentleman said, from SAF. You need to have active engagement with the farmer. You need to look after his interest, and then he will look after your interest. You will get the gherkins through the year, and they can be stored in barrels. I remember there was a brand called Tiffy. For about 15 years, we were making the non-gherkin products, and which meant a range of jams and sauces and salsa sauces, pasta sauces, which we were selling in the brand called Tiffy in India as well as exporting. And the relish that is made out of the gherkin is basically, it's processed gherkin. It's called relish. And that relish we were selling to the America's largest importer, called Bay Valley. The Bay Valley brand, the produce was made in India. Okay, so it's not that we can't do it. The potential is so huge, not only in the gherkin, in the value-added products in the gherkin also. And if you have active interest in that, and if you have gherkin growing capabilities, let's talk about it. Let's see how we can put up a facility that you can put up or you can be associated with.
Thank you very much, sir.
Welcome.
Thanks a lot. We will get in touch with you, sir.
One company in Thuthukudi, they are exporting, sir, jerkins. One Raja, this is a very big company.
Yeah, so they don't grow it there. Gherkins grow in Dindigul area. Okay, but people are exporting from all over the place. Okay, there's no, like I said, there's no dearth of exporters. They're all merchant exporters. But there's such a huge facility. I mean, the requirement is there worldwide. One of the biggest companies there, IAP, is a European-based company. Now it's almost fully Indian-owned. Okay, it keeps fluctuating back and forth. When the market becomes dull, it comes back to the Indian part. When market in Europe grows, it again goes back to IAP. So back and forth progress goes on, but they're huge. So a lot of big players are there, but most of the gherkins come from South India.
It's going to be difficult for new entrants, right? For
No, not at all. Nothing is difficult. In food area, like I said, nothing is difficult. It requires passion. It requires a little bit of knowledge and a lot of conviction. A little bit of knowledge, a lot of conviction, and a lot of passion. It's not difficult to get into the gherkin industry. After all,
I was told a lot of units got closed, especially this jerkins.
It's because there was an oversupply, and at 1 year, and the other year, when there was an oversupply, the farmers didn't get money. Next year, the farmers didn't produce gherkins. That's it. The units had to close down. 1 year, they thought they can get away with paying him less. Next year, there were no gherkins to produce. So if you keep your farmers happy, okay, then only your industry can survive, because we are an agro-based economy. Unless farmer does well, you can't do
well. But are the Europeans trying to squeeze the end price?
No, that of course they will. That everybody tries to do. When you go to the shop to buy something, don't you bargain? So everybody will try to bargain. Nothing wrong in it. No? But you should be able to tell him, no, honestly, hey, without this much of income, I'm not going to do business. If my farmer doesn't get this much money, I'm not going to supply you. I'll find somebody else to supply to. After all, he also buys and supplies to somebody else, no? Keeping a profit. You go directly and supply. You have to work hard in the market there then. If you're not working hard in the market to grow the gherkins, at least you can work hard to go and sell it, no? But we can't just be sitting in one office and expecting international trade to occur. It doesn't happen. If you're not growing the product, then you have to go to the market to sell it. That's very important.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. What an amazing session, Mr. Amit. You had it all going and walked your talk.
No, I am very happy that people liked it. And
you're an absolute expert in areas of food processing and how to attract more clients.
But I'd be very happy if anybody has anything that they want to be associated with. I'm available. Sure, please share my numbers with them on your group, and anybody just call in. We can have a scheduled appointment, a discussion over the phone, on Zoom. Like I said, these days, thanks to COVID, everybody is connected. And let's take this up, sir.
Sure, sir.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for spending your time. Thank you very much, sir. Bye. Take care.
Bye.